Hi, baddies. Welcome back to another episode of Terra's Baddies Club. We're getting into the groove with more episodes coming out, and I'm so excited. I have a lot more material on YouTube this past week, and I'm just excited because I love content making. I love putting things out there. I may not be the best editor, but I am working on it. We're growing, we're learning, and eventually we might find an editor that will help us out too. But I've also been working on putting together my nonprofit, getting the stuff to file everything. And I'm so excited. Also, if you guys feel like gifting right now, I'm getting the money together. I have a GoFundMe and then I have my Venmo attached to the link as well. So you guys can go to my Linktree, just go and do all of that if you guys feel like that, or just sharing my journey and my goal right now. Spreading the word, that always helps. But I'm excited for today's guest. When I had her on, I was going through a lot. I was going through ups and downs of a relationship, and I get really insecure. I get really anxious in relationships. I talk about how I have an anxious attachment. I even in this episode talk about self harm and how I feel the need to hurt myself when I feel abandoned in these relationships, or I feel like my self worth isn't there and I feel the need to punish myself. I luckily have been doing the anxious attachment work course for the secure relationship with Julie Menanno. She is great and amazing, and I love the conversation we had. I also just felt like she was so there for me in this moment that I needed her and needed to have this conversation and felt so validated by her. So check out her Instagram, check out her website because it has been so helpful to me. But we're going to get in conversation with Julie Menanno today, the secure relationship, and let's get into this episode. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you today. I am just such a fan of your page because you have such great content and you
Yeah.
create these little pictures with sayings and words of how to literally respond to your partner. And I think that's such an amazing thing.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be of help.
Well, thanks. Well, so the folks that don't really know who you are or haven't discovered your page yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Julie Menanno, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I exclusively work with couples. I specialize in attachment theory, working with 99% of the couples I work with are in an anxious avoidant relationship. And so I, from there, started a social media Instagram account teaching people, hey, look, this is attachment theory, but here's what you can do with it to, in your relationship, move toward a more securely attached relationship with your partner, and which includes a more securely attached relationship with yourself. So what I did from there is I wrote a book, Secure Love, which walks couples through, and it even works for individuals, kind of the self-help version of the work I do in my practice with my couples. I have a process called emotionally focused therapy for couples. And so from that, I also have a podcast where I work with a real couple for 20 sessions to bring the work from the book to life, and I commentary all the way through to help people see how, this all applies to real life. That's some of what I've got going on. Of course, I've got a few other things in my bag right now always, but that's my main gigs.
Yes. And then I love your main gigs, but I love also too, I've been getting sent emails about courses that you guys have
Mhm.
or that you
Yes,
have.
yes. Yes, I do. I do courses. So I think I have one kind of explaining attachment theory and the anxious avoidant relationship. And I just put one out, which I'm really proud of. It's actually several hours long, and it's for anxious attachment, the self work. So, it's a lot of people need, if you have an anxious or avoidant attachment, there's a lot of self work involved in improving your relationship. And I think if I can reach both sides on their level, which I haven't done avoidant yet, it's going to make starting couples therapy a lot faster because you will have, yourself grounded in some of that self work. So it's me kind of walking people through, hey, here's the process to find a more secure attachment with yourself, which is basically a more secure attachment with your own emotions and sometimes with your thoughts and the meanings that you make and some shame in your views of self. So I'm really proud of that one. I think it's going to be tremendously helpful, especially for people who just don't have access to therapy. Of course, it's not, having a therapist walk you through it personally. And there's always, some downsides to that, but it's a great second best option and is a huge augment to even if people who have therapy, just makes everything faster and more efficient to have that grounding in emotional health within self.
I agree. I almost signed up for it last night because, the anxious person I feel is more inclined to work on themselves than, say, the avoidant.
I thought so too, but when I started doing workshops, which I do some live workshops sometimes, I was actually pretty surprised because the one I do for avoidant attachment is always has the most participants.
Okay. Okay. I
Yeah.
love hearing that, especially since I tend to go towards the anxious, avoidant relationships, and
Mhm.
I'm usually more so anxious. And
Mhm.
then I feel that I get to a place where I am secure, and
Mhm.
then the avoidant does something that triggers me, and then I go back to the anxious attachment.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, look, when things are going well, I feel secure. But when things aren't going well, I feel anxious. And really, an attachment style is not defined by when you're secure. Things are going well. It's defined by when things aren't going well. So it's how you're managing those triggers. So if you're finding that when you get triggered, you go into anxious behaviors, that's what needs to be worked on. There's truth to the fact that we need your partner to not do things that are triggering and work on that. And that's their self work. But I need for you to show up in new ways when you do get triggered that aren't these same anxious attachment behaviors that are really kind of missing showing up for the real emotions,
Yeah,
if that makes
okay.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's always in the withdrawal that
Mhm.
I freak out, and then I send those fiery messages, and
Yeah.
then I get a little manipulative, and then I
Mhm.
say, like, no one cares about me, no one,
Mhm.
like, and then I actually do feel that way because of not getting that source. And then I think growing up, I watched those dynamics as
Yeah.
well in my family.
Sure.
And my father, love him. He's great, but
Mhm.
he is, my mom and dad got divorced,
Mhm.
and he wasn't always around 100% of the time, and
Mm.
then had like other families. And he's great today. Like, he actually listens to the podcast, he listens to
Nice. That's
everything, and
beautiful.
he's so supportive now. And it's really great how I've reconnected fully that relationship and got all my
That's
needs met.
beautiful.
Thank you from that. But
Yeah.
it's hard still in relationships. And I always tend to choose the men that have a lot going on.
Mhm. Mhm. A lot of baggage. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my last ex, and he's public out there about this. And it's funny, I actually gave him your book too, so
Mhm.
that we could try to work on things. But then we broke up, and then, I think we worked on things separately. However, I just like, he's avoidant, and
Mhm.
he's out there about being avoidant, and I think that I helped him also have that awareness.
Okay.
And so I don't know, what are some tips that you would even give for me, because I'm not going to lie, I get to the place where when I feel rejected, I want to die and I don't want to be here and I want to self harm.
Okay, so we need to figure out what that's what you're doing. You're saying, "Look, my feelings get so dysregulated. I don't know how to show up for them in a healthy way. So the only thing I know to do safe and not consciously or by choice, but is to go into these kind of desperate behaviors where I'm trying to get some safety back on board, but I'm trying to do it in these ways that aren't really working for me. But somehow every time I get triggered, I keep finding myself going back to that same place." So this is where the course can really come in handy because it will tell you how to start really truly dealing with those feelings without just keep circling back to those anxious or sometimes even dangerous places. And so it really, it's like the anxious behaviors, the texting are your ways of trying to reach for safety. And then the self-harm is your way of just trying to find some relief to how bad you're feeling, right? And so the answer is the same, which is how can we get you relief in a way that is actually going to, give you relief, maybe not right away when you start the work, but over time. And then you're not so vulnerable to your partner's drops, you know,
Yeah.
not gonna, yeah, it hurts, but you're not gonna spiral off into like completely, losing yourself, which just then makes you feel worse about yourself and on it goes. And so, and there is a chance that maybe if, you don't have a partner who can ever learn how to show up for you. And you might find that even if you do all this work and you start being as healthy as possible, they're not doing their side of the work. But there's still so much value in shifting your part here and seeing if that relieves some of the pressure of the relationship in a way that fosters their healing. But still, this work is for you at the beginning, at the end of the day, no matter what. That's the first goal is to get you helping you with your big feelings.
Okay. Do you have a lot of clients that say suffer from this as well?
Yeah, all
Okay.
of them. All of them. I mean, I don't have not all my clients go to, what I say is look, if you're going to the level of self-harm, that means your pain is just, higher, right? The level of the reaction is going to reflect the level of the pain. So not all of my clients are getting to that point, but a percentage are, sure. But it's all the same work. It's all learning to deal with the pain regardless of the degree of the pain. Everybody's hurting, but every couple I work with without fail has an anxious partner that is experiencing what you're describing to one degree or another.
Okay. Well, it's good to
You're
know
not
I'm not
alone.
alone.
No, 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 no. You are absolutely not alone. That's the hard thing about being anxious is those feelings are just so right there on the surface and just the smallest thing can come along and touch them.
Do you feel that a lot of anxious attachments might be like hypersensitive?
For sure. Yeah,
Okay.
because and for good reason because you've had somewhere we don't fear emotionally what we don't fear what we haven't experienced, right? So anxious attachment partners somewhere in life in their history have been emotionally abandoned, sometimes physically abandoned and dropped and betrayed in whatever way over and over and over again. They've been emotionally invalidated over and over again. So, of course, their nervous systems learn to be on alert for that. That's their way of staying safe. We would want the nervous system to do that. But as adults, sometimes that sensitivity needs to be handled in a different way. We start handling it with all these anxious attachment behaviors that actually aren't helping the real wounds and fears and bad feelings. So, yes, definitely more, oversensitive, I would say, but oversensitive because there's a lot of unhealed wounds lingering around in there that need some attention and healing.
Yeah, no, I claim it. I
Mhm.
claim the
Good. Yeah,
hypersensitivity.
that's the start, right?
Yeah, and I'm also
Uh,
a Cancer, so they say Cancers are, emotional crabs.
yeah, well, emotionally sensitive for sure. That's what I've heard at least.
Yes, yes. Well, I am so happy to know I'm not alone in
No,
these
no, not at
feelings.
all.
And also, my mom's been married 5 times, my dad's been married 5 times, so
Okay. Yeah.
definitely abandonment from those
Yeah, I can only
relationships.
imagine. Yeah. 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 That's a lot of trauma, intergenerational trauma type stuff. And, that's hard.
Yeah, it was great.
It's not a lost cause though. It can be healed. It's just a matter of learning how are all these experiences impacting me today, and what needs to be healed around that. And a lot of times, even though it's a thousand different things, there's like certain themes, and you can, heal a chunk of those that are kind of bringing up the same feelings. You can work more efficiently with patterns than having to go through like every single trauma you've ever experienced.
Okay. Yeah, no, my pattern is I get a little jealous
Mhm.
when, say, and I don't get jealous as like, oh, a guy's hanging out with like his friend that he's been friends with for a while. If I know her, I met her, I know that like the girl's not trying to like get
Mhm.
after him in a sense, you know?
Okay, sure.
And then he also has a following where many, many women there's that literally have had crushes on him,
Mm.
been obsessed with him, and then whenever I say something, I'm viewed as, "Tara, that's a lot. That's,
Mhm.
you're not right." And then I end up being right about that person and their
Yeah.
intentions.
That's rough. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like if you don't sense a threat, it's fine, but if you do sense a threat, then that's when your nervous system gets kind of offline. And is your partner able I mean, I think in that situation, you have some evidence that your instincts are on, at least some of the time. And, I think that, it would be nice if your partner, if you could say that in a healthy way, which is like, look, I understand where you're coming from. Like, you don't want to be micromanaged, and maybe that put some pressure on you. But at the same time, I have had repeated situations where someone was kind of trying to interfere. And does that make sense to you? The first thing you need is for them to just really be able to let you know, okay, your feelings make sense. There's some validity to what you're feeling, and I can honor that. And how can we go forward to kind of manage this situation? I would probably want to know more about why it seems like someone could why you believe that you're so easily replaceable. Like, what's going on with that? Like, why is it so easy for you to say, well, just because someone else kind of wants him, that means he's going to dump me? That there's some stuff there, I think, on your end. And then there's some stuff on his end about not really being able to kind of validate your fears. And
Okay.
what do you need for more reassurance in the relationship? Is there some self work there? Is there some relationship work there for you to feel more reassured that even if people come along and you can't really escape that, other people wanting your guy, right? So what is it that so quickly takes you to this is the end?
Yes. Well, okay, there was a relationship where, and I love that you're here just giving me some
Yeah, it always goes into people's personal stuff, so I'm okay with that. Most
things.
of people are struggling with very similar things, so it's usually really helpful for everyone to have real life examples if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I did have a relationship that I was with him for 5 years, like, fully together. We lived together for the 5 years and then a 3-year limbo after that, and every time the relationship would end, he would hop to another relationship,
Okay.
and it's funny too because I would always be like, "That girl's interested in you, that girl." No, I just think it might stem from that and
Sure.
also not being good enough. And then there was another relationship that I was in on and off for 10 years with a guy that actually like hit me with a car.
No.
And yeah, he was a major druggie,
Oh,
and he would always tell other people, like, oh, I'm not hooking up with Tara, I'm not doing this. And I think also there's just so much that went into my self-worth of I'm not good enough for anyone.
yeah,
So
that'll
I
do
think
it.
yeah. So I think those are the feelings that came up for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's, one of the things is how are you going to deal with those feelings in a healthy way here? And one of those ways is to try to communicate with this guy in the healthiest way possible. And then his work, if that relationship's going to be healthy, your self work is to be able to communicate that with health, right? Vulnerability and healthy assertion. And then his work in the relationship is for him to be able to hear that and respond to that and share his own feelings and needs. And then you guys to be able to kind of figure out a way to navigate all of this.
Yeah.
If ultimately he's not able to do that and he is kind of behaving in a way that just keeps not working for you, then that's a sign that maybe, it's not going to be able to be a healthy relationship because you're over here doing your work and he's not really trying to meet you there. But it is really important. A lot of people don't do enough self work before they give up, as opposed to doing all the self work and then giving up. So I always say, look, I encourage people to really, really dive in and try to work on yourself first as you work on the relationship and really give it your all, because you can never really know how much of this is my unresolved feelings without, doing that. So,
Okay. I
and a
love
lot of
that.
times too, when one partner starts healing and they start showing up in new ways, the other partner starts to feel more settled, starts to feel more close, starts to feel less threatened, and that starts to bring out the best in them. And they start maybe being a little more open to working on themselves because now they're in a safer environment. And so I always encourage people, look, do you for a while and don't expect your partner to right away meet you there. Give it some time, because it does take two to make a healthy relationship, but it only takes one to get the ball rolling.
Okay. And
Yeah.
when you say do you, I say like the start is get your book first.
Yeah. That's the
And
instruction manual. Yeah.
yes. And then where do you go from there?
Well, that course is great. I mean, that's really a lot of emotional work. Again, it's several hours worth of emotional work, but it's really just a matter of, you know, people with anxious attachment, they think that they're vulnerable because they feel so much, but really what they are is emotional. That means they feel the emotions and they can express the emotions, but they're not really vulnerable until they really start tapping in and deal, because underneath anxious attachment and underneath avoidant attachment is the same stuff. It's deep fears, shame, poor views of self, unresolved grief, and maybe something else I'm missing. But those are the three main things that I work with, and four main things, I guess I should say. Although negative views of self and shame are kind of hand in hand with each other, and then all that culminates into poor communication. What anxious attachment is and avoidant attachment ultimately is poor regulation of emotions and poor communication. And so there's so much self-work in being able to like really get down there and show up for yourself. You got all this stuff in the basement that gets ignored every time you get triggered and you start going into these kind of frantic behaviors. And so it's a matter of really getting down there, accessing those feelings, feeling them, sitting with them, listening to what they have to say to you. And then really once you can kind of get there, it's a very regulated way to be. And then you start to go, okay, what am I going to do differently now? Right? I'm going to this place. I'm sitting with it. It's painful. So now I need to figure out what this place needs for healing. And then you have the new moves, and so the idea is that with that you can start doing those feelings and showing up as your best self. You don't have to keep going to those desperate places or those attacking places or those self-harm behaviors that aren't good for you and can be scary for a partner. And when you start to consistently start behaving in new ways, that's when you're really going to be able to see, is that, it's so good for me, I'm feeling better, but is the relationship actually improving too? And if it's not, and then you give it some time, that might be the time to say, I'm getting healed. I'm feeling more confident in my own ability to tolerate pain. Maybe it's time to go find someone who is maybe more willing to meet me where I need to be to have, to feel safe and close to a partner.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think the book is a great place, but the course takes the self work chunk of the book and just deepens it dramatically.
Well, I really want to sign up for this course because I
Yeah.
feel I need it right now, especially with so much just like I hit myself when I self
Yeah.
harm.
Yeah.
And it's just to punish myself.
Yeah.
And like also, like, I don't know, like get mad at myself for
Hmm.
even getting emotional with
Yeah.
him.
Well, and see, some of that anger, you're directing it all to you, and some of it needs to come out at him or other people in your life who've hurt you, but not in a destructive way. That anger has something very, very important to say. You don't know what to do with it. The energy is so big. So you're just trying to like take it out on you, beat yourself up if I can just get better. But, the way that anger needs to be dealt with is with healthy assertion, which is being able to say, you know what, I'm not okay with this. I am angry about this. My anger is my body's way of trying to motivate some sort of change here. And I realize I've been, beating myself up. And sure, there's space for me to, have problems with what I'm doing too. But some of this anger isn't so much about, for me, some of it is I need to talk to you about it. And then ideally, two healthy partners are able to kind of validate each other's anger. That doesn't mean taking responsibility for it, but to be able to say, it makes sense to me that that made you mad.
Yeah.
I get it. Your anger is valid to me. Anger that doesn't get heard and validated will never go away.
Okay. Well, I realize when I don't speak my truth, when I
Mhm.
just let that person be avoidant, just stay in their feelings, and then I ignore mine completely, and I'm just like, okay, fine, like you do, you do you for the hundredth time,
Mhm.
and then I get so angry that I get like this lump in my throat,
Mhm.
and
Yes.
then I'm like, it sits there.
That anger needs some help. I don't know what it is because there's different meanings, there's different things that it's about. But anger is always having a hope for change. Now, a lump in your throat might be grief. I don't know. I mean, there could be some other kind of emotions, but because I know anger is a secondary emotion, right? Meaning it's going to come up to protect. And there's definitely a lot of more vulnerable pain under there that's not being addressed and communicated that, again, I keep referring back to this course, and I hate to do that, but that course actually does all of this. It's to help you organize this anger, feel it, listen to it, know how I need to, like, react to this anger in the healthiest way possible.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of stuff that's happened to me. I feel like, do you know any part of my story?
I do. I know
Okay.
that you had this situation with this really awful guy, right?
Yes.
I don't know if he's the Dirty John, right?
Yes, yes,
And
the
I
Dirty John guy.
yeah, and is he the one that hit you with the car or?
No, he's the one well, he stabbed me a few
Oh
times,
my god.
and then that was my mom's husband.
Okay.
And then I feel that a lot of that relationship also like creeps into my relationships when I
Oh, of course, yeah.
don't feel listened to. And then it re-triggers me back to like, oh, this person's not listening to me.
To that, if nobody's really getting help or getting the right kind of help to heal that, there I don't really believe that there's such a black and white answer to that question. I mean, many people have had trauma and have worked things out with each other and themselves and made it work. But that aside, what happens is one partner's dysregulated and they bring something up and then the other partner gets dysregulated and now they go into their needs and then the other partner now is like, well, what about me? I'm the one who brought this up, and then they get more triggered and then the other one, and so it's just like a negative cycle. It just keeps going back and forth. And so, the whole book is about getting couples out of these cycles, but the most important part is that one partner is in the listening role at a time and one partner is in the speaking role at a time, and they're really able to get to the place where they can take turns, because if they can't, they'll just keep going back and forth over and over. And so ideally, when you're bringing this up to your ex about, look, this bad stuff happened in my past. And when, I see you with this assistant and I don't feel heard, it kind of brings all that stuff back up. And that's a really painful place. Can you, help me out with that? Your partner gets to the point where he can hold his own trigger. He's able to kind of go, okay, I have some trigger here too, but I'm going to put it to the side and I'm going to really lean in to her. She's really needing some help right now. She's really needing to be heard and validated. And then later, when you're feeling settled and heard, then maybe it's time to go into his stuff. And then at that point, your role is to kind of put your stuff to the side and lean in. And when partners can start doing that, what I have seen over and over is the relationship symptoms, because everything bad going on is a symptom of what's not happening. So when you can start bringing that in and getting out of these negative cycles, the relationship symptoms just start to resolve naturally. I guess hopefully he has some awareness that that's how he's trying to regulate his own fears, is by pushing you away. Well, if I just get her out of here, I don't have to worry about being abandoned. But that's really not actually healing the wound. The wound is
Yeah.
still gonna be there, it's just gonna keep showing up in other ways, and then, as you know, then he starts to miss you because it wasn't a real breakup, it was a reactive one, and then he pulls you back in, and now you're getting all these mixed messages, and he's not learning how to deal with his own feelings, and it's just, like you said when we started, it's exhausting.
Thank you. I'm just so thankful to talk to you today. Something I feel like that you said earlier is about disorganized attachments. How do you know when someone has a disorganized attachment opposed to anxious or avoidance?
Okay, so you're gonna see less predictable behavior. Okay, so someone with an anxious attachment, when they get triggered, their behavior is gonna be fairly predictable, right? They're gonna start trying to close the distance, kind of getting, maybe kind of attacking, maybe blaming, maybe getting really desperate. Someone with avoidant, very predictable. They're going to maybe kind of get defensive and fight back, but ultimately they just are really good at shoving down their feelings and trying to avoid conflict. They're not going to open up a lot about their own emotions. And then they have a really hard time helping their anxious partner with their emotions because they don't know how to help themselves with emotions. And so you're going to see a lot of predictability,
Okay.
disorganized attachment. And, another thing is people who have anxious and avoidant attachment, they grow up in homes that are emotionally threatening. I mean, I'm sorry, emotionally insensitive.
Okay.
Someone with a disorganized attachment, they grow up in homes which are emotionally dangerous, which means usually the person they rely on for help and love is also the person who's really hurting them. And that creates an enormous amount of inner conflict. So you're going to see less predictable behaviors, you're going to see more extreme behaviors, and you're going to see just a lot more inner pain and turmoil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's so interesting because at times I try to figure out people's attachment wounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, do they
We all
have
do. Yeah.
right? And then I deal with a lot of clients, not lately because I put that on the back burner because of my relationship stuff. And I
Okay.
want to give my clients like my full self. So
Sure.
just haven't done coaching in a while for that, but
Okay.
I've done it for podcasts now. I've
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
transitioned over just
I
because I
love it.
feel like, with the state that I've been in with my relationship, I can't give people the advice that I would need to give, even though I have a few clients getting married this year.
Nice. Well, see, you did some good work.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, thanks. And I know you have to go. So, what is some last minute advice you might have for anyone that is struggling right now?
I would say, that probably the most important thing is how are you doing your own emotions, right? How are you not, everybody out there that's struggling is there's a 99% chance they're self-abandoning their own emotions. And I know that's kind of a vague concept, but it means they're staying stuck in anger and anxiety kind of chronically, right? Whether it shows up in their relationships or their work or just needing to always be busy or lashing out at people or lashing out at themselves, right? Or being overdriven, perfectionistic, substance abuse, addictions. I mean, anything. If anybody's doing any of those things and more, their nervous system is chronically stuck in anger and anxiety. And that means there's all this stuff underneath there that isn't being addressed, right? And so they've got to learn how to access those feelings. I don't mean know them intellectually, I mean access them in a felt way where you can feel. And then when you're in that feeling place, listen to those feelings. Try to, and there's a process here, right? It's not intuitive, because this is this type of stuff that people ideally would be learning growing up. Most of us don't, but knowing how to really feel and really listen to those feelings. What are they needing? Being able to start showing up in that place, not ignoring it over and over, and then learning how to go about getting those needs met. Do I need to communicate? Do I need to work on some shame here? Do I need to start talking to myself in a new way? Do I need to start sitting with my feelings longer? Do I need to do some relationship work? And most importantly, do I need to shift the way I'm behaving when all this gets triggered? And there's always going to be a yes there. And all these bad, destructive, damaging behaviors that people are doing, nobody's doing it on purpose to be bad. Everybody's trying to self regulate all this painful stuff that's not getting dealt with. So I want to see people really dealing with it, then they don't have to keep going back into the same habits that aren't getting them anywhere over and over again
Yeah,
indefinitely.
100%. Well, I
So,
really appreciate this
well,
conversation.
thank you.
Thank you so much. And where
Thanks
can
for having
people
me.
find you on social media?
The Secure Relationship on Instagram at The Secure Relationship. There are imposter accounts, so just make sure that, you can the spelling's right. I have 1.3 million followers, I think, right now. So all the other ones are just gonna have, like, a few thousand, but also the blue check, sorry. The blue check is the best way. So
Perfect.
from there, you can also go to thesecurerelationship.com. That's where you're gonna find kinda everything I have to offer, links to the book, the courses, the podcast, the whole deal. So,
Perfect. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening to this episode of Terra's Baddies Club with Julie Menanno, The Secure Relationship. I hope you guys check out all her material on Instagram, check out her courses. Her courses have been really helping me out lately, and I have been rebuilding. I haven't been self harming lately, and it's been great because I've been really recognizing my worth and that I'm worthy in a relationship. So, I hope you guys hit the subscribe, like button, all those buttons. It really helps. Give a 5-star review, a written review. It just really helps in growing the podcast and getting more material out there that can help other survivors, other victims, and also heal your hearts. Until next time, I'm Taryn Huell, and thank you so much for listening.